started as people come in. I know it's a little bit early, but this is just a discussion. Anyways, I shouldn't say just, but whatever. It's going to be a discussion about building apps. I think I might have said building web apps on the schedule. That's where most of my experience is, but this could be related to mobile apps and some of it. We could take the discussion there, but I've got most of my experience in building web apps. Before we get started, I did want to take a quick poll of like the types of roles each of you is playing in your existing organizations or want to play in new organizations or whatever. So why don't you raise your hand if you consider yourself a developer primarily? All right, and how about designer? And what about like a marketer or a salesperson? All right. What about like product manager or idea person? Okay. Anyone in here like in QA or something I haven't said? Ops, okay. I have one more need for a role here. I need a volunteer to run this microphone around to people during the session. You want to do it? That's the on button there. All right. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit first, and then we'll get into what kind of topics we want to talk about. I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended. I have a few things I have in mind, but I want to get the discussion going in the way that the room wants it, not the way I want it. So my name is Ben Edwards. You probably saw me out on the stage there. I've been doing this MinneBar thing for 7 years. When I'm not doing that, I am part of a company called Refactor, which builds web-based and mobile applications for many startup clients and some big clients, and we've been doing that in an agile way for also around 7 years. Some of the product teams I've been a part of are for a company called, or a product called Lean-To, which is a simplified project management app with like an agile software development slant to it. We started building that as our first app that we built as a company, and we just built it to scratch our own itch. That's at lean2.com if you want to check that out. MileMarker is an innovation platform for harnessing like all the ideas that are coming from everywhere, whether it's your customers, your employees. You know, you can help to collect those and curate them, and then prioritize them so you know what to work on. It sort of ties in with the Lean-To product, and that's available to check out at getmilemarker.com. And lastly, most recently, I was involved with a team that built a product called Cloud Profile, and we built that as a social enterprise platform for small businesses to like more effectively use social media and social networks and like optimize their online presence. There's a lot of buzzwords in there, but that's kind of like what they were. It's buzzy enough to have gotten the attention of a larger company that got acquired, and so I've been a part of that acquisition for the last couple years and learned a lot about scale and being a part of a big company in that way. So then that's me. I want to hear about what you guys want. So I want to have some people throw out some topics about building web apps, what kind of things you want to hear about, and then also in my 2 cents too. So anyone? Pricing? In Minnesota, that's not a choice. All right. It's going to give us a good amount of things to talk about for now. Feel free to change the direction of the conversation as we go. If we get through these, I'll throw some other ones out. So let's just go down the list. Well, no, I'm not going to start with when to scale. I think that we shouldn't think about that. But I would start with the idea of like what is a good time to get a product out into market. And the answer that I would say is always sooner than you think. There's been documented, people have documented about how if you've marketed the product before they even had a line of code written, that's extreme, I think, but there's something to that. I think you have to feel out your market, learn about the market, and just sort of understand like what you're actually going to build before you build it, and spend a lot of time. And because you can get into the trap when you are building it and going to wait to like give it to the public, is like you always think maybe there's just one more feature that we got to add. You don't know at that time. You don't have the most information. You need to see what the market will bear and what they want. What are some other thoughts about minimum viable product, if that wasn't clear? Trying to get to something that has value to someone out there, some value that they'll pay for, ideally, and then like how do you get to that quickly? Anyone have any ideas? So it ties in with what Colin said. I think that's true. Yeah.
It's more about testing the viability of that market than getting 1.0 out. It's actually pre-1.0 because you're going to see if you actually can get any traction. And that for me was kind of an epiphany of, 1.0 doesn't have to be that first version. It's like the infinite beta for Gmail where, they didn't hit 1.0 until 5 years in or whatever. So.
Yeah. What do people think about the idea that your product should always be like the minimum viable, that you shouldn't like overload until you need to? It's maybe something like 37 Signals might say, that they try to like really fight feature additions and make them work for it. I've never really thought of it as like a continual MVP, like always just do like the most basic set. I feel like I do enjoy like simpler software when I'm using it, but I haven't thought of it in that way. Well, yeah.
If you have enough money to build a feature, you can add it. And if you have a market research and pricing for it, then it will actually return something, because you're always building something to make money. You can't run a company if you're losing money, so it's all priced and it's all financing what you have in your company right now. So adding features for the sake of features doesn't make any sense.
So I was wondering how people figure out their minimum viable product, in the sense of I'm in the medical industry and everyone we talk to has a different set of we can't buy it unless it has these 5 things, and the 5 things will not match between everyone.
Yeah. That's hard, and I think part of it comes down to what people tell you they need and what they actually need. I think there is a difference. I think that's not to say that you're going to be able to get your full price that you want to get ultimately out of the gate, but I do think I would want to stress that try to get people to commit to paying something for what you have. Like, hey, this is maybe only 80% of what you want, but it has value to you. I'd like you to pay for that. So yeah, it's a difficult thing, and it's really difficult when you hear feedback and you get you have a new client possibly, and they'll be like, all you need is these 3 features, and you're like, all right, well I can add those, but then how do those 3 features affect the software for everyone else and whatever? So yeah, I've experienced a lot of that doing building software for clients. Yeah. Go ahead. Where's that mic? Hold on one second.
I was just wondering, has anyone ever made one of those fake it before you make it style MVPs, where you kind of create a facade, a front end, and then the actual logic and the algorithms are actually just done by a person on the back end, but you're doing it to sort of facilitate the learning process? I read about people doing that, but I've never actually spoken with anyone who's done it. So if anyone has done that, I'd just be interested to hear about it.
I had a point on here to talk about even A/B testing concepts. I think somewhat famously, the guy who wrote Tim Ferris' 4-Hour work week or whatever, he was working on titles for his thing, and he like just A/B tested with Google Ads which one people clicked on more, and used that as a like means to say like which concept they thought was better. Yeah, I wonder how much you can do in an app sense. I heard anecdotally like someone in town doing this recently, where they were just going to like have was it Brad? Yeah. Brad, talk about that.
So I have a web app that has been out there for a while and has like 5,000 users, and so we've been thinking about building a full-fledged iPad app for it. But I don't really have all that much time to develop, so I don't want to develop it if it's not going to sell. So my partner is actually mocking up. We did like a bunch of UX for what it would look like, and he's mocking it up. And so we're just going to put on the site kind of a big picture of an iPad with what the screens would look like, and then see how many people click on it if we just have a buy now button. Like how many people would click that button? And the next screen is going to be like, well, here, give us your email address, and we'll let you know when it's done. And you know, if we get 1,000 page impressions a day, and we get 20 people who click that link, I'm going to build it. And if not, then I just take it down, and I wasted an hour of my life.
Yeah. That sort of goes into the idea of like proving your concepts either like as a success or failure like sooner rather than later. Like it's a good outcome to learn that your idea is not good, or like that no one wants it. You know, that's a good outcome. It's a worse outcome to build it and then learn that. So getting that information sooner rather than later is definitely good.
Ben, I also think that it has to do with what your idea is and what your vision is. You could let anyone drive and add things and remove things from your idea, but if you have an idea and this is exactly what it is, and you draw the boundaries around it, you want customer feedback from that, but then you also have to adapt for everyone. I think it's plays into how much you're willing to bend and move or pivot for a different market, and I think that you're playing in that space at that point.
So that goes to your question about definition and feedback. Can you expand on that a little bit, like what you're kind of going for, and maybe what sort of feedback cycle you've been using?
Yeah. Well, product definition. I mean, what your product you're actually going to deliver is. I've done a bunch of apps that a marketing person said the product was this. We've all seen that cartoon, what the marketing person said, what they sold, and what was actually built. You know, the discrepancy between all of that. So you can create monsters and mutants just by letting anyone come and give you feedback. And so I kind of feel like getting the right feedback from the right type of person is really important in trying to determine where you're trying to actually end up.
Okay.
So
do you think there's any procedural ways that you could help this process?
I think user testing in early phases and showing your ideas. I really like what you were doing in terms of creating a mock-up and showing it to people. I think that's really helpful. The other side of that is you might burn some users who thought you maybe did have an iPad app, and when they go to try to find it, they don't find it. So that's always the trade-off that you have to make. And the idea there is you burn a few users to on the whole deal.
Brad has mostly contempt for his users anyway. No. Okay. So, you know, one of the ways that we try to get continual feedback at Refactor and other projects that I'm working on is using agile methods, where the feedback loop is not, you know, let's define this thing up front and let's like build it and then here you go. I think, you know, with weekly iterations and like continual client like interaction, it's really hard to get like out of sync. I think just trying to have a process that makes it really difficult to be out of sync is like a key to the process. Because I've been on projects like, you know, past life that, you know, we did a big reveal. Like, here you go, client, this is what you asked for. And like, it was just a little bit ridiculous to think that you could like go away for like 3 or 4 or 6 months and come back with a vision that matched. So I think agile processes definitely help. I think team makeup makes a difference. You know, you said like the salesperson sells to the one thing to someone else, and then the development team builds something. I've never had the luxury of really having like sales and marketing too much, and so I don't have that problem. But I wish I did. I wish I had those people out there selling and finding out what it was that people did want. And I don't know, maybe not selling.
So,
what we're not
so Ben,
building.
I really like what you're talking about in terms of a closed, small feedback cycle with your users who are accepting this. But we have to realize that the BA or the person who is defining the product, who has the idea of what the product should be, isn't necessarily an end user, right? So you need fresh batches of users who haven't seen this before to experience your product and give you another level of close feedback. Close feedback. So I think agile methodologies and user acceptance testing and getting your application in the hands of who dreamed it up and designed it is one step of that, and then the next step is releases, continuous releases. Etsy actually had over 10,000 releases to production. Yeah. Did any of you guys see the blog?
They do it continually.
Post on that?
Yeah.
So they have things set up so that they can deploy all the time. It's tested. They have automated tests for certain things, and then what they do is they actually take a certain portion, like 5% of their traffic, and redirect it to their Canary, their new version, and they monitor the number of stack traces or number of errors and get feedback based on that. And then if it's good, then they'll push it to production. So I think this feedback loop exists at multiple levels of your whole deployment and creation.
All right, come up here. I want to get a more clarification on team workflow question. It's up in the corner here.
Just wondering about sort of like how do people work with when you have like multidisciplinary teams with designers, developers, ops, and QA. Like how do you guys optimize your workflow? Especially it's a little bit different when you're working from sort of an agile sort of process versus sort of like typical sort of larger organizations. I was wondering if anyone has any cool tips or tricks on that.
Yeah. So we work with multidisciplinary teams. We think it's a great way to go, and so we don't have the whole hand it over the wall type of thing. Everyone's kind of working more in unison. That said, our typical team makeup is fairly small. I'm sure it's much smaller than the team at Wufoo, but two developers, front-end developer who's also the designer, project stakeholder, all sort of working in conjunction. I'm not sure that we've really figured out a great team workflow. We write user stories. Those user stories then get kind of broken out into tasks, and oftentimes you'll have like a UI task that has to sometimes precede like the development task, and so then you're kind of like out of sync. You do have like a little bit of like a time shift for things, and we try to work where those things are really like tightly integrated, but it is difficult sometimes. Does anyone have some feedback on that? Where's Colin?
Yeah. I work in a pretty big team, and one thing what I find is really important is having proper team handoff from design to back end to front end to QA, because if you don't have an agreed upon mechanism for moving that work forward, then the marker for success gets all skewed. So, the back end team said, well, we did it, it's to spec, but it's not sufficient for the front end team's needs. So I guess what I found is having good communication on that team and making sure that the team as a whole is graded on success as opposed to individual pieces can make a huge difference, particularly on a large project.
Do you have a dedicated project or product manager on that?
Sometimes.
All right.
Sometimes.
Is that person usually the one who's responsible for making sure that the vision is passed along with the... Oh, no?
No. I wish. No. It's kind of a grassroots thing, but...
All right.
One of the things that has worked for me is when we start a new project, it's very linear, and then it starts breaking down into more agile methodology. So at the beginning, it's the business analyst, the project manager, and they are just working with putting together the use cases, gathering all the requirements, and then at the kickoff, that's when it's kind of like, a big love fest. Everybody gets together, shares a whole series of all the documents. But one of the things that I get so frustrated about is at the end of the project, let's say, you go through your first lap, everybody thinks, oh, now I don't need a document anymore. So over the past year or so, I've developed this love-hate relationship with Confluence. And so at the end of every project, it's just taking and aggregating all the content, create a wiki page for it, and then the great thing about that is if your organization also has Jira hooked up, that you're linking to all the various Jira tickets. So you've got a complete log of everything that you've done, who did it, what the status is, and then the great thing is then the folks that are doing documentation, like the user manuals, knowledge transfers, all that stuff, they've got this tome of stuff at the very end. And then, as time passes and the product continues to live and breathe, but new people come into the team, all you need to do is just direct them to this, to the wiki, and then they can very quickly get up to speed on what they need to read about, who did what, where everything is stored. And so that seems to be working. It's, at the very beginning, very linear, very quick gathering of information, and then breaking it down into 4 to 6 week laps, and then small releases every 4 to 6 weeks.
What kind of software are you writing, or is being written?
This is for Lawson Software, and so a lot of human capital management type stuff. So.
All right. I don't know if we're circling around it. I don't know who else has a workflow that has worked well for them, either with a multidisciplinary team or not, building a product. No, you're from Lawson too. You can't do it. All right.
Okay. How many people are actually doing continuous deployment in town here? Is there anybody who's got a success story about continuous deployment? Because that seems to be something that's key for getting the feedback loop, because if it takes you another week after the product's developed to actually get it up and running, then your feedback cycle is now 4 weeks, not 2 weeks. So.
All right. Does anyone have using continuous deployment successfully and wants to share? No one.
Yeah.
Anyone over there? You can probably speak loud enough.
I was going to say, we're not using continuous deployment because our users basically need an email before they get a new feature first, but we have it automated so a deploy only takes 4 hours or less, and that's from sending the email, everything is 4 hours. So.
For people who are interested in continuous deployment, one of the really great and seminal books on it is by Eric Ries. It's called The Lean Startup, and talks a lot about sort of his process for coming up with continuous deployment. And what people don't realize is you don't jump straight into continuous deployment. You kind of do it in steps. You start off with things like continuous integration, for example, just like having it so that when you submit code to Git or Subversion, that immediately goes to some kind of testing server, right? It doesn't have to go directly to production, and then you figure out how to mirror those things on there. So you don't have to think about jumping in it and having all the test cases go. Sometimes it's just about figuring out how to get a push system to work. We don't have currently we have continuous integration, but we don't have continuous deployment right now where we automatically push production. But one way that we're able to sort of help get things out and get feedback loops a lot faster for us on our team, and then we've kind of helped in our larger organization at SurveyMonkey, is that we do interface demos. So we just launched one, and what it does is basically, if we're building out something, usually the front-end team can usually build out something much faster than the back-end team, and before things get hooked up. And a lot of times, a lot of the user experience testing that you do is often on the front-end work, because this is what the users experience. So what we'll often do is we'll release a public interface demo that people can just play around with the interface. It doesn't save to the database, and therefore there's a lot less risk for the ops team. And then it goes out there, and at the end of the demo, you just say, thanks for playing with the demo. Give us some feedback here at the end, and if you want to, sign up for the mailing list, and we'll let you know when this is out in beta or what have you. And that's worked out really great for us. We both did this when we launched Wufu, and also now that we're helping redesign some stuff on SurveyMonkey. So I highly recommend it. You're going to get, in terms of getting good feedback from people, your conversion rates are very, very low usually on feedback for things like that. You're going to be less than 1%. But it's a good feel for in terms of helping your teams feel motivated by seeing code actually make it out live to there. It gets users and customers who are passionate about the product pretty excited about it, which will be a smaller percentage. So the feedback's not as great, but all the overall sort of emotional effects are kind of really satisfying. Also, major bugs, just by seeing things go from, basic localhost working to the production, you iron out a lot of things ahead of time because you're just in that practice of getting something on production, even if it's not hooked up to the database. Yeah.
At Refactor, we've got a project that we're not doing continuous deployment, but we're doing continuous delivery. There's a book called Continuous Delivery, and they make a distinction between continuous deployment, which is every code push goes into production automatically, and continuous delivery is along those same lines and is between continuous integration and continuous deployment. And the idea is that it puts the decision into the hands of the business. So there's no technical reason not to push every piece of code to production, but it puts power in the business's hands, and so we're doing that with push-button automation. One click will promote whatever is in QA on 3 separate Grails apps into a production environment.
Yeah, I can second that. Our app that we have up and running, we have continuous integration running our tests and running on every check-in. We also have processes that that a QA person can go through and click and deploy to this environment or do some of those manual tasks. So I don't think it's a like zero to continuous delivery. I think or deployment. I think it's a total spectrum that you need to implement lots of different pieces leading up to continuous delivery. And the whole point there is to limit the human interaction and make the human interaction and the human steps as minimal as possible, and to minimize the friction there, so that it makes more sense. So that you have you have your tests automated, you have your builds automated. You can click one button and have it go.
Well, I'm gonna move on to customer acquisition. First customer or the 100th customer or whatever it is. Let's talk a little bit about that. I want to ask Amy over there maybe about customer acquisition, if you have any thoughts about that, and how maybe MailChimp has done it.
Sure, yeah. We have never done sales or anything like proactive customer acquisition. The best strategy for us historically and now is building an open and well-documented API, and then kind of promoting and working with integration partners. That's been extremely effective for us.
Who else? I mean, one of the strategies that is maybe less than successful a lot of times is the build it and they will come strategy, where you build a nice app, you put a marketing site out for it, come up with some pricing plans, and cross your fingers and see, like, all right, like, we've built this thing. Goes back to the minimum viable product, when to get it in front of customers, and try and get that first acquisition. It also depends on what kind of product you're building, obviously. There's the subscription-based products that are maybe at a lower price point, the $49 base camp type of deal. You're not going to go and do a lot of like hand-holding in-person sales. But if you're trying to get something that's a subscription for $1,000 or $10,000 a month, or a single purchase license type of agreement, you can potentially go face to face. And I really think that acquiring customers in a sales, getting your first customer in a sales acquisition is way easier than in a marketing. I feel like marketing is just spread it out there and see what it does, and it costs money to do that. It costs money to do sales too, but you can get to it. And also a valuable thing with the sales is you can get feedback right away. Like, a lot of times they'll tell you, like, all right, this is why I don't like it, or this is why I do like it. Who asked this question? Okay. What has been your experience? All right. But you've got an app.
What?
You've got an app that you want.
I've got an app I'm going to be building. It's a mobile app with a server-side component, and the strategy I'm looking at right now is actually selling it through resellers because I don't have the clout to sell to the customer. They do. So I'm building more the open API and the platform for them to be able to serve their customers better. And so it's like I've already got 2 potential resellers, people I know that have customers that already need this. So it's like I feel like I already kind of may have the first customer. I have my first resellers in the bag, and I think they can get customers on board. But it's still that terrifying thing of like, even though I know, like I have my resellers telling me people want this, it's still that kind of terrifying, like, well, what if I build it and they're like, oh no, they don't want it. It's that kind of terrifying, like, am I going to build it and no one's going to come, even though I have people basically clamoring for it at this point. And so I was just kind of curious what other people's experiences were with that cycle of, you know you're legit when you actually have people paying you money to do something versus sticking your neck out hoping somebody will.
Do you have a lot of access to your resellers' customers? Do you know that market? I've done web development for those same customers, so I have some access to them. And it seems like a sure deal at this point. The question is, can I scale it up, or am I going to get stuck with, just enough customers to be ramen profitable and never go anywhere beyond that? So I'm not sure. And there's another competitor in town. They have a different strategy, and it's like, are they going to snatch up everybody before I come along? And so there's a lot of stuff going on in there. Right.
Wondering if this might kind of go with marketing though, but have you tried? There's loads of writers out there that spend a lot of their time just reviewing apps, and if you go to like smashingmagazine.com or just do a search for anybody that reviews websites, mobile apps, anything like that, and just start pestering them to review your product. Have them write an article about it, or get into one of their general articles that is reviewing similar products. And so it's kind of like an editorial review approach to getting marketing and a little bit more eyeballs on it.
Get on tech.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they'll tell
it doesn't
two
work
people,
all the time.
and they'll.
Yeah.
One thing that worked for me was I just called it the Coattails Approach. Well, find something that's already really popular or that will be really talked about at some point in time, and find a way to associate your product with it. So like I have a novel writing application, and just so happened that 2 months after I launched it, I knew it was National Novel Writing Month. So I thought, oh, this is both potential customers and it totally goes with it. So I just put up in the general discussions on their forums one link, and I had 500 new users a week later. And so now 2 years later, every time NaNoWriMo comes up, my software comes with it automatically, and I don't have to do anything. And there's multiple discussions talking about my stuff, just because I found a way to essentially ride the coattails of something that was way more popular than I was ever going to be.
Getting to really know your customer, and what I mean by that, I work over at Honeywell. I'm a senior project manager. And if you know the environment, both that helps you get in or you don't even get considered. In just a few examples, what kind of databases are they using? If you're focused on a business app, we're a big SharePoint user. I've got a bunch of apps we're working on now that if the app works with SharePoint, we'll consider it. If it doesn't, you're not even in the ball game. I suspect very few people in this room use BlackBerries. Obviously, their market share is going down, 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 down. But in businesses, you'd be amazed the amount of people that are still using that. And so if we have someone who's coming to market an app and they actually service the BlackBerry, we look very highly upon that. I'll give you an example. There's one called TapTalk that works with B-Bulletin, and we spent money with them. It's a good little app, but also it works with BlackBerry. So my senior management, who are some very significant people in the organization, can actually access the information. So if you're focusing on a business app, make sure you understand that business environment because it either helps you get into it or not even be considered.
Well, I think for me,
I knew it was a bad idea to give you the mic.
It might be. It might be. This is scary because you're going from like idea and your product into reality, right? I mean, you're trying to confirm everything that you built and what you thought about what you built at the market at that time into reality. It's like the concept of stock option billionaire. That's meaningless if the company, crashes and burns and it's worth 1 penny, or nothing the next day. It's only when you actually acquire customers that it actually matters. And then secondly, there are companies out there that you can actually give them a preview access to your site and have a person actually go through your experience and try it out and give you just kind of like a mind stream of what they're thinking, how it makes them feel, to try and confirm some of your assumptions about the market, about the actual application and the experience you are really delivering.
Anyone else on this topic?
Yeah, two points. One is domain expertise. You don't want to try to sell the first customer if you don't understand their domain. You have to have some background in what you're selling and what they need. We found it very early. And second, if you're talking about your application, you need to have a really good, the first question you'll get, who is your competition? What box are you playing? And especially if you're trying to market through all the analysts like Gartners and stuff, they want to put you in a box. If you don't know what your box is, they're not even going to talk to you. You have to come in with very, very defined market, understand your competition, be able to compare yourself to competition, and understand specific customer needs. If you don't, your conversation is going to be very, very short.
Did you have something to add, or anyone over there? I'm going to make you talk, Casey. No. All right, let's get into pricing and how you develop your pricing, what kind of model you're using, if you're trying to get people in with free and then like transition them, or what that is. Like, who has an anecdote or something that's worked for them or hasn't worked? This is about failures too. I guess I could talk about how we've priced our first app when we first made Lean-To in 2007. There was really like not that many great players out there in like the simplified agile project tracking tool space. We put it out in like beta and let people use it for free for like a long time, like 2 years. Way too long probably. But we always had that thing where we were like, okay, one more feature and then it'll be good enough to ask people to pay for it, or let's just do one more thing, and there always was the one more thing. And so, because we had a price in mind, I think we were like, okay, well, we want to be competitive with XYZ. We wanted people to use this instead of maybe Basecamp for tracking projects, or whatever it was. But we've come down from that a lot, and we're like, this tool is what it is. It's simple. It's not going to meet the needs of someone who needs like Jira with like everything that Jira can do. But it'll meet some people's needs, and so we wanted to price it so that it was kind of like a no-brainer decision to get it. It wouldn't be a big cost burden for like most teams at all. So that's how that's how we've evolved the pricing on that. But that's not to say that it's still even the right one, because we don't have a million customers. Who else? Someone's got to have a product. Well, all those guys in the corner have pricing plans, but there's got to be some other people.
Pricing has to be very creative. You can't just come in and say, it's going to cost $1, right? First, you look at your competition, again, understanding competition, what they're charging, what market can bear. I work with very creative salespeople. They'll push price as much as they can, and they'll come up with creative way to package a deal in such way where they get as much money out of the customer as they can possibly get, and what customer can bear. It varies from industry to industry. You can charge semiconductor customer more than they can charge a food processor. Right? Food processor will carry a price of $500, and the same product sold to semiconductor will cost $10,000. And you have to be very flexible. You need to understand what customer is willing to pay, what kind of returns. They're not going to pay just for the sake of paying. They want to get something in return. So you need to be very, very flexible with that. But start with competition. What is competition charging? Maybe if you want to be really aggressive and you can afford it, undercut it.
Yeah.
I can speak about what we've done. We saw that we had a variable price based on how much you use the system, and we're for the medical profession, and that actually sold worse than one on average that would be higher but a fixed cost. And we've found that the fixed cost that's higher on average for everyone is actually selling better than the variable cost ones.
Predictable. Yeah, and they fear the unknown of like, oh, my bill could be thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here.
I guess there's two, stories, or MailChimp's is, for the first 7 years that we were a web application, we had no freemium plan. And our freemium plan that we launched 3 years ago is what kind of rocketed us from having 100,000, to 3 years later having 1 million. But the first 100,000 customers were all on paid plans. And that's how we were able to get to a point where we could afford to have a freemium plan. And I think what you really don't want to do is another one of the Barcamp Tour companies, Grasshopper, they had an experience with their product Chargeify where they put a free plan out and then basically had to retract it because they realized it wasn't sustainable. So I think it's attractive to do a freemium plan because you can get a lot of users signed up and using the product, but you can end up with a lot of trouble converting, and sometimes it's better to be in it for the long haul, even though it takes longer. You're making money and there's a little bit less pressure.
Have you ever surveyed your users that are free and the ones that are pay, and is there like any sort of difference in satisfaction that you can see across those?
The funny thing is actually by far the users that create the most trouble, I guess, who are, maybe who get caught the most for abusing the system or who, cause the most stink about not having the right things that they want and all that, those are always our free users. Our paid users are, I don't know, they just have a kind of a different level of appreciation or something. And we don't really, we have a few things that you get from using the system that, for paying for the system that you don't get for using it for free, but for the most part it's pretty similar. So, and a lot of that stuff is from a security standpoint, so stuff we don't want to give free users access to because they might be spammers.
Right.
But for the most part, our better users are the ones that are paying.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to say too that I don't need this. The pricing has more to do than just transacting. Pricing has to do with perception too. So you can price your product like higher than your competition, and you're the premium thing, and there's a perception that it's better in that way. And sometimes it has to be better usually, but I don't know always if that's true. I think that you can be a premium product without necessarily, or a premium brand without being a premium product, but.
Probably not going to sell them a $5 a month. I don't usually need microphones, but you're probably not going to sell them a $5 a month app, right? Like
they wouldn't want it.
Right. They don't have the trust. It seems too cheap, basically, right? Which is a little weird and sad sometimes. But you do need to look at who your customers are and what they're used to paying for software, and are they even going to consider you if they don't think that you're like up to the level that they're expecting. And in some cases, in the big companies of the world, that comes down to how much are you charging? Well, if you're charging that much, you must be good. And so there's that whole issue to deal with as well.
For the most part, we were able to offer technology that was better and more innovative than the enterprise customers. We just couldn't get the trust factor because of where our price points were.
How can it be so cheap?
I know, exactly.
You know?
I had a follow-up question on that. You said you had 100,000 users on a free plan.
No paid.
Oh, okay. Okay. I guess my follow-up question is to you and to the rest of the group. How much are you looking to invest to get that level of customer base where it could really scale? It took you 5 years, you said? 7 years? And a team of how big? Okay. But even so, 7 years with 15 people, you had several millions of dollars into this thing, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was just reading somewhere about there's a certain time when you have to sort of forget about what you've put into the product and cut bait and deal with the sunk costs. But there's also a certain point of time where you have to maybe persevere and just push forward, because you can't expect things to happen overnight. I think all the successes that get publicized with Pinterest getting 10 million users or whatever they have in months, it really is disheartening for people who've been working on something for years. But I think by and large, vastly more common is the little engine that could sort of story, where you're actually just getting slowly acquiring customers. You're not going to get 100,000 customers in a week usually.
From my perspective, I won't buy a monthly plan to something. I like the free plan to give me just enough of the features that want me to convert to a paying customer, like for instance Evernote, Dropbox, etc. So I think if you're looking for your first customer, I think freemium is a good direction to go first, but give a certain feature set and then add features at a pay level, of a decent price. From my perspective, I guess.
What? Yeah, 37 Signals, you have to search for it.
37 Signals made it a tiny link under the pricing table, and they found that they converted way more business of people that would have gone free and stayed there, but they started paying. But it was still there for the people who really, really, really wanted the free and were willing to search for it. But I mean, they I don't remember what the number was, but it was a significant revenue boost just by taking free out of the pricing grid and putting it on the bottom.
If I'm paying for something, I know I'm going to trust it. Dropbox is free. So do you think your data is safe? So just be careful with Basecamp, when I share my data with Basecamp with different projects, I know my data is safe. The files upload and stuff. So just pay attention to that.
Or you hope at least.
Yes.
You hope. And you have somebody to go after if it's not.
All right. Anything else? So we're almost out of time. I sort of glossed over when to scale, because I don't think for startups and small companies that's an important question really, because I think it's later. The answer is always later. And then bootstrap versus VC, I wasn't being totally facetious when I said you only have option of bootstrapping here in town. There's just not that many you can get angel investors and you can find investment and you can go to the coast, but it's just really hard. And our mentality is more of bootstrapping, but I don't know. You can find some people from Code 42. They're a good example of someone who bootstrapped until this year, and then they just blew it up with VC money. Got 52 million or whatever, but they were bootstrapped all the way through earlier this year. So yeah, I don't know. We covered a lot. I hope it was valuable to some people, and move on to the next one. You have a last parting shot?
Paul Graham is he's the founder of Y Combinator. He writes great essays on all of this stuff. How to get Robin profitable before you go get VC, so that you don't need the VC and you can get a better valuation. Just mind hacking. I mean, I've been reading back through his archive, and he wrote stuff in 2008 that's so prescient today that it's mind blowing. So check out Paul Graham's essays if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff.
All right. Thanks.